the bell icon to turn on notifications.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar on PowerPoint hacks, tips and tricks. Now in this webinar today we're going to look at some PowerPoint hacks that you should know in order to create PowerPoint presentations that are slick, modern, audience appropriate and most importantly engaging, because that's what it's all about. And what I really want you to walk away from this presentation today is feeling inspired to really go back and the next time that you're asked to create a presentation, have some new ideas, play around with imagery, fonts, icons, all of that kind of stuff. So the next time that your manager comes to you and asks you to put together a presentation, you can really wow them. And what I find over the many years that I've trained PowerPoint is that people in general tend to use PowerPoint in the wrong way. Now, PowerPoint isn't your presentation, it's just the tool that you use to design and deliver that presentation. So really what it should do is be there to enhance what you as the presenter are saying, not distract. And it should also be used to present data in a clear and effective way. And I'm sure many of us over the years have sat through numerous very dull PowerPoint presentations. I know I have, where we just have slide after slide full of text, not particularly interesting. So today I'm going to show you how to make things super interesting and also show you some new tools that you might not have used before to really add some pizzazz. And what I find is so often I hear people say that they don't really know where to begin or that they aren't a designer and so find it difficult. So again, I'm going to show you kind of like a formula to just creating a PowerPoint presentation. It's really simple. You don't have to be any kind of designer, but if you follow certain steps, then you can put together something that looks really nice. So let's move into our first slide. Now, as I was putting this presentation together last night, this is the slide I always use to introduce myself. So I'm going to do that now for anybody who's new to our webinars. So my name is Deborah Ashby. I'm an IT trainer, Microsoft subject matter expert, and it's basically my job to design, deliver, facilitate Microsoft training courses, both online and in the classroom. Now, as I've been speaking there, you can see on this slide, I have quite a lot of text and it's quite difficult for you to read that text and listen to me speak. It's also not particularly that interesting, and I don't want to say anything too negative about Adam's lovely Simon Says It template just here, but it's not really that interesting. So I thought to myself, how can I kick off this webinar? How about I start by just showing you a different way of thinking about designing slides by redesigning this particular slide. So let's move on to my redesign, and I just want to highlight a few points to you. So straight away, what you can see here is something that looks a little bit different. Now, the most obvious thing here is the photo that I've used. In my previous slide, I had a more professional photo, whereas now I have a picture of me on my holidays. So straight away, for anybody who's looking at this presentation, they get more of a sense of who I am because I'm showing them things that I enjoy doing. Now, this is a really important point that a lot of people miss, particularly if you're somebody who does give a lot of presentations. It's really important that your audience connects with you as a presenter. And the more little things about yourself that you can pepper in without it being too overwhelming, the better, okay? What I've also done here is I've taken a look at the fonts that I've been using and I've updated all of my fonts to a more modern style. So it kind of gets away from Calibri, Arial, all of those general things. I'm now using a more modern font. I've cut down on the amount of text that I have on the slide, and I've also used iconography as well, just to make it a little bit more interesting. And if you notice when this came in, I used a little bit of animation that adds to the slide as opposed to detracting from the points that are coming up. So just a few minor changes there, which have really taken this slide from being kind of a bit boring to slightly more interesting for the people who are viewing it. So I just wanted to put that out there right at the beginning so you can kind of see the difference. So staying on this theme, let's move across to our agenda, which I've kept in that similar kind of style. So these are the items that we're going to cover today. I've picked 10 or so that we're going to go through. And the way that I've chosen these are things that I use all the time and things that I've learned along the way that I find are really, really helpful and also help me create presentations that look really effective. Now, everything that I'm using in this presentation when it comes to images, icons, all of that kind of stuff, right at the end of the session, we're going to take a look at these resources because everything I'm using today is a free resource that you can use in your presentations. And that's a key point because one of the things that people struggle with is knowing which images to use, finding a place where they can download free images without any copyright they have to worry about in order to use in their presentations. So we're going to do that right at the end. But let's start by jumping into our content. And that first point, aligning objects on a slide. So I'm going to come out of here for the time being, and we're just going to jump across to, let me scroll to the top here, this first presentation. Now, I want to start out by talking to you about something which is a major bugbear of mine. Now, nothing makes a PowerPoint presentation look unprofessional quite like objects that aren't aligned correctly on the slide. So if I jump across to slide 2, you can see an example of that. Now, this is a pretty extreme example. You can see here, all of these circles and the icons within them are not lined up. There's also inconsistent spacing between my text just here. Now, as I said, this is quite extreme. Obviously, I've put this together for demonstration purposes. A lot of the time, if you receive a PowerPoint presentation, the misalignment of objects will be a bit more subtle because people will try their best to line up things on a page without necessarily knowing the correct way to do it. So you can see that something is slightly off as opposed to very off like we have here. So one of the most important things is making sure that you know all the different tools you have that are going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to lining things up on your slides. So let's start out by doing that. So here, the first thing you can see is I have icons within these circles, and the icons, for the most part, are not dead in the center of these circles. So I'm going to do that first. I'm going to select the circle. I'm going to hold down Shift and select the icon. So essentially, I've selected 2 objects. If I go up to my home ribbon, I have an arrange drop down. And if I go to align, I can then use these tools to center these objects. So I'm going to say align center. I'm going to go back to arrange and then do align middle. And that puts that icon right in the middle of that shape. I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to make my selection in a slightly different way. So previously I selected by clicking, holding down Shift and clicking. If you want to select objects, you can also just drag around and it will select both of the objects for you, which is sometimes a lot quicker if you have a lot of objects that you need to select. I'm going to go back up to arrange and do the same thing, align center, and then down again and align middle, just to center that in that respect. Now, one thing I would advise that you do is I find myself using the alignment tools all the time. So to make my life a bit easier, so I don't have to keep jumping into this menu, I will always add align center and align middle to my quick access toolbar to make them super easy to access. So I'm going to right click on align center, add to quick access toolbar, and I'm going to do the same for align middle. Right click, add to quick access toolbar. So now I have both of these icons just here, making it really easy for me to find them. So let's do the last 2. I'm going to draw around this again, align center, align middle, draw around to select, align center, align middle. So now I have my icons lined up within my shapes. Those all are looking good. But I still need to line up all of the shapes. Okay, so I want all of these to be in a line. Now, the way that I do this is I'm going to need to start adding in some grouping because currently, if I was to click on either the icon or the circle and align these, it's just going to align whichever object I'm clicked on. So what I want to do is go through and group the icon and the shape together. So I'm going to select both objects, and a quick way to group objects is by pressing the Control-G keyboard shortcut, which essentially makes them all one object. So let's go through and do the rest. So I'm going to select Control-G to group, select again, Control-G, select once more, Control-G. So now I have all of these grouped together. I can then select the whole lot. And again, I can just drag around like so. And then I can use my alignment tools to put these in line. So I'm going to say Align Object Center to align them like so. Now, one thing you might notice is that it's fairly close, but I do have inconsistent spacing in between these circles. So if you look at the bottom one here, the spacing between these two circles is a little bit wider down here than it is further up. So another tool that you have in order to make this spacing even, if we jump up to Arrange and go down to Align, we have Distribute Horizontally and Distribute Vertically. So if I select Distribute Vertically, it's a very slight movement, but now I have equal spacing in between each of my objects. Okay, so really important, those alignment utilities. And as I said, I would encourage you to add those to your quick access toolbar. So now that we've aligned those, we now have these text boxes. And I can see here that these aren't particularly aligned. So point 1 looks like it's kind of aligned. Point 2 is not too bad, but point 3 is definitely a bit too high. And point 4 is a little bit too high as well. So essentially, I want these text boxes to be kind of in the center of their related icon. So a way that I can do that is I'm going to select this object, hold down Shift, select, and then I'm going to align these objects to the middle. And I'm going to do the same for all of these. So I'm just going to hold down Shift, align to middle, and you can see very slight movements as I'm doing this. And align to middle, just to line those up. So now I have equal spacing and everything is all nicely lined up. Then, of course, if I wanted this whole lot centered on this particular slide, I could select everything. So I'm just going to draw a big rectangle to select all of the objects. I can group them together, Control-G to make them one object, and then I can align to the center to move that across. So very quickly, with a few clicks, I've been able to get my alignment exactly correct. And this is the way that you should be aligning objects, either on the slide or relative to one another. All you need to remember is where those arrange options are, and also a few keyboard shortcuts when it comes to grouping. Now, if you're interested, if you need to ungroup objects, you can do Control-Shift-G, which will ungroup all of those objects. All right, so reasonably straightforward. Let's move on to slide number 3 and take a look what we've got going on over here. So this is still kind of on that subject of grouping, aligning, and positioning, but we're going to move our knowledge forward a little bit now. Now, another thing you have when it comes to aligning and positioning things on a slide, if you right-click your mouse and go down to Grids and Guides, you'll get this little menu pop out to the side. And I would recommend when you're working in PowerPoint, always make sure you have Smart Guides ticked, because that's going to help you when it comes to aligning things on your slide as well. So for example, if I click on this middle circle and I pick it up, can you see as I move it, I'm getting those little guidelines, which is kind of giving me an idea of when I'm in the middle and where I am in relation to other objects in the page. So sometimes this can really help when it comes to aligning things as well. So don't forget about that, available in the right-click menu. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select all of these objects, or these circles, I should say, like so. Now, if I jump up to the Shape Format ribbon, you'll see as soon as you select a shape, you're going to get the contextual ribbon come up. What you also have in here is the selection pane. Now, I find the selection pane really useful. What it basically does is it lists out all of the different objects that you have on your slide. And when you add something new, so if I was to add another shape onto this slide, PowerPoint's going to give it its own generic name for that particular object. And you can see here I have the rather generic text box 1, rectangle 4, so on and so forth. So what I like to do when I'm using the selection pane is I like to give these meaningful names so I can easily identify my objects. So for example, if I click on text box 1, you can see it highlight in the slide what that's referring to. In this case, it's just the heading, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. If I go to text box 3, this is the title. So I'm going to double click and you can see that I can rename it to title and hit enter. Next one, text box 23, I can see what that is, so I can double click and I'm going to say this is DS for Darius Stone. And I'm going to say that that is text. 22 is the text for Lucy Moore, so I'm going to give that a name. And I'm just going to go through and make these a little bit more meaningful. So this one here is oval number 1, as far as I'm concerned. So let's call it that. Then we have oval number 2. And you can name these whatever you like, but this one is the text box for Mark Parker. So I'm going to say MP text. And finally, we have oval number 3. And of course, you can give yours more meaningful names than I've done here. But now, by looking at these different objects, they're a lot easier for me to identify. And what I can do from the selection pane is that I can make selections from here as opposed to clicking or dragging a box around them. So if I want to select all of these oval shapes, I can click on oval 1, hold down Control, select oval 2, and oval 3. Now this is particularly useful, this method, if you have a lot of objects, particularly if they overlap each other, because when objects are placed on top of each other, it's quite difficult to get your mouse in there and select them all. So I like to use this method. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump up to Align and I'm going to say Distribute horizontally to make those a little bit more even. Then what I might do is Control G to group them all, and then I'm going to center these on the page by using Align Center. Once I've done that, I'm going to Control Shift G just to ungroup them, because now I have to deal with the alignment of the labels underneath. So again, I'm going to hold down Shift and select all of these text boxes, and I'm going to choose Align Objects Middle, just to pull those in line with each other. Now, technically, what I want here is I want the text for Mark Parker, CEO, to be in the middle of the circle above, and the same for Lucy Moore, and the same for Darius. Okay, so I need to select both of these objects, and then I can align to center. Let's do it for this one as well. To select them both, align to center, and the final one, select both, align to center. Okay, so very quickly, everything is now looking nice and lined up. Another important thing to note is with this title here, so where it says Meet the Management Team, and I'm actually just going to change these to capital letters just to make that a little bit nicer to read. Now, if I wanted this title in the middle of all of these objects, if I was to select this placeholder, go to the Home ribbon and Center Align, it's only going to align the text within that placeholder. So that's not actually what I want to do. What I can do is drag the text box so that it meets the edges of the slide. And then when I center align, I know that that text is going to be dead in the middle. And you'll find that come up quite often when you've added text boxes in and things like that. If you want to center them, make sure you make them the full width of the slide. Okay, and let's just make that title slightly bigger. So a few tips and tricks there. I've spent a little bit longer on that because it is so important and one of my #1 bugbears when it comes to presentations looking unprofessional. Let's change gears a bit now and move on to the next thing. This is one of my favorite things to do, and this is filling objects with pictures. And this is something else that I see frequently in PowerPoint presentations that gives them a really unprofessional look. And that is, people tend to put images into a presentation and then they tend to stretch them or squish them up. And that usually happens because they've put the image in and it hasn't quite fit the slide or whatever object they're trying to place it into. So let me show you a quick example. I'm going to add a new blank slide and I'm going to insert a picture onto this slide. So up to insert, down to picture, and I have a picture saved off onto my PC that I'm going to use. And it's this picture just here. I'm going to click insert. So it's inserted this picture in and it looks fine at the moment, but you see that I have some blank space running down the left or right hand side. So what I find people will often do in this scenario is they will click on the picture and then they will use the resize handle, drag it out to fill that white space. And I've seen a lot more extreme examples than what I'm showing you here. This picture, it still looks pretty okay. It is slightly stretched, but I could probably get away with it. But you'll find a lot of the time you'll see images which are very clearly stretched and things start to distort. And that's because people don't understand how you can insert a picture and the correct way, essentially, using crop and fill. So I'm going to show you this again. I'm going to Control Z just to take it back to how it was. So in this scenario, what I would do to fill this space without stretching this picture in any way, shape or form is that on the Picture Format tab, I would use the Crop and the Fill option. Now, when you select Fill, you're going to see these little black guidelines or handles around the outside of your picture. And you use those handles to drag and fill whatever space it is you need to fill. So I'm going to drag those out like so. You then go back to Crop and select Fill. And what it does is instead of stretching the image, it zooms in. So it's keeping the aspect ratio, but it's filling the page. And once you're happy with it, click on the crop button, and there you have a perfect image that takes up the entire space. So the crop and fill utility is such an important tool to know and use when you're dealing with images. Okay. Now, let me show you this in a business example. So we're going to jump back to this page, this slide, I should say. So in this example, I have some circles again, and I want to fill in the pictures of each of these team leaders. So I've done the first one already. This is Mark Parker, the CEO, and I want to do the same for Lucy and Darius, but I don't want these images to appear stretched or squished. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing is you need to make sure that you have your pictures downloaded. I have a couple of pictures that I'm going to use, and later on in the course, I'm going to show you exactly where I get all of the images that I'm using in this presentation. So I have my image saved off. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go down to Format Shape. And you want to expand the Fill option just here because we're going to fill this shape with a picture. So I'm going to select Picture or Texture Fill. Now what it will do is it will fill with the last image that you used. And for me, that was this image. Now I want to use a different image. So I'm going to say Insert from File, and I'm going to select the picture that I want to use. And it's this one just here. And there we go. So it's now inserted the picture, but again, it looks a little bit off. So I'm going to use that Crop and Fill utility again. I'm going to jump up to Picture Format. We're going to go into Crop and we're going to say Fill. And look what it does. So now what I can do is I can resize this picture and move it into the position that I want. Now, in general, if you're doing something like this, you kind of want everybody to look as if they're the same kind of size in your image. So I'm going to make this a bit bigger. I'm going to move Lucy down a little bit, and yeah, she's kind of looking a reasonably similar size to Mark Parker. Once you've done that, we just click the crop button and it crops that image perfectly. I can then do the same. I can right click, go to Format Shape, Picture or Texture Fill. It's filled it with the last image that I've used, but I can go to Insert, select the image that I want to use. So let's use this guy this time. Sometimes you have to wait a few seconds for it to load. And this is a pretty good example. You can see there it's very squished up. It really doesn't look right. So again, up to picture format, crop, fill. And then you can make your adjustments. So I'm going to make it larger so that he's kind of the same size as the other two. Like so. Pretty happy with that. Click on crop. And there we have a perfectly cropped picture. So crop and fill, something that you really need to know if you work with a lot of images in your PowerPoint presentations. Let's move on. Now, this is a little hack that I use all the time, and it's the eyedropper tool. And this is a great little tool that's available in PowerPoint and in fact all of the other Microsoft applications as well, that really helps if you're trying to keep a consistent color scheme across different elements of your presentation. And what it allows you to do is pick up colors from your presentation and use them in other places. So for example, on this slide, I have quite a lot of different colors going on here. And it might be that I want to change the color of this title text to make it a little bit more interesting. So what I would normally do is highlight the text, jump up to the home ribbon, and then select a color from the palette just here. And I might go in and decide, yes, yellow looks nice, and change it to that color. But if you always do this, you tend to have a presentation that has all these different random colors going on and nothing really matches. So the presentation becomes not very cohesive in its color scheme. So a much better way is to use a color that's already within the presentation. And you can do that by selecting the eyedropper text fill. So as soon as I click that, you see that my icon changes to this little, I think we call those pipettes, if I remember back to school. And when you hover over part of your slide, it shows you the color that's going to be applied to your selected text when you click. So I can essentially pick up any color in this presentation to apply it to that text. So I'm going to go for a light color. I'm going to use this light kind of lavender. Click. And you can now see that the color of that text has changed. And it instantly has a lot more cohesive feel because I'm using colors already contained within the presentation. It's really good for consistency. So that little eyedropper tool is really great. Now, a question that I've been asked before about this eyedropper tool is, what about if there's a color on a different slide that you want to use? Because when you select eyedropper, it only allows you to select colors on the current slide. But it might be there's a color on this particular slide that I want to use over here. So I'm going to show you a little workaround. This is the only workaround that I've found for this. If anybody knows a different way of doing it, then I would love to hear it. But let me just show you in case that is something that you want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump across to here, and maybe I want to use a color from this background. So I'm going to select a piece of text. So I'm going to select his surname. I'm going to go up to eyedropper, and I'm going to choose a color from this background. So I'm going to do like this orange color just here and click. Now what you'll see immediately is it changes the color of this piece of text. So all I'm going to do here is just change that back to how it was. But now when I go back to this slide, if I want to make this word that color, I can select it, and you'll find it underneath recent colors. It's going to be the first one in the list. I can click, and there we go. So that is my little workaround for utilizing that eyedropper tool to pick up colors that are on different slides. Really great little feature. All right, let's move on to something else. Now, I'm going to show you how to replace all fonts within your presentation. So this is particularly good if you've received a presentation that has lots of different fonts in it, or maybe you've copied a slide from an old presentation that you did into a new presentation, and you want to make the fonts consistent. You want everything to match and have the same font. So instead of going through each slide and changing the font, you can do this all in one go. So what you'll see, if we choose this slide, if I click in some text and look at the font that's currently in use, I can see that I'm using Futura Round. So if I want to replace all of the Futura round font in this particular presentation, I can do that by jumping across to the Replace option, and you can see we have Replace Fonts. Now, in the Replace drop-down, it's going to show you all of the fonts that are currently in use in your presentation. So you can go through and select which one you want to replace. So for me, that's Futura Round. And then you can choose what you want to replace it with. And you can see you have the full list of fonts in here. Now, the one that I'm going to choose is, let's scroll down. I'm going to choose this one just here, Lato Light. Select it, click on Replace, and it's replaced all of those fonts across my presentation. So again, a quick way of making your presentations consistent. So don't forget about that little option. All right, moving down. Now we get onto something that is pretty exciting. And this is really one of those things that can take your presentation from being a standard, boring, moving from slide to slide into something that really knocks people's socks off. Now, I'm sure you've all been used to using animation in your PowerPoint presentations, but now we have a new transition called Morph. And I say new, it was released in, I think it was the 2016 version of PowerPoint. So if you're using 2016 or Office 365 or even 2019, on the transitions ribbon, you should see this transition just here. It's called Morph. And what Morph allows you to do is it adds animation essentially to your presentation. It allows you to zoom in, zoom out, and also pan around. And it has a really smooth, nice effect. So I want to show you a quick example. I'm going to run this presentation. And you can see that I have a map. So maybe this is a map showing all of the office locations and where they are. And when I move on to the next slide, look what happens. It zooms into Florida. So maybe if in my presentation I'm talking about all of the offices, giving a general overview, then I want to focus on Florida, I can have that zoom in effect, which is just really, really nice and slick. So let me show you how I created this. Now I'm going to delete out this slide first of all. And this was very straightforward. The first thing I did was duplicated this slide. Now, a quick way of duplicating a slide is the keyboard shortcut Control-D. So now I have a copy. What I then did is I want to remove all of these pins because I'm just zooming into Florida. I don't really need these pins everywhere. So I'm going to select one of them. And a quicker way of doing this is to jump up to your graphics format ribbon and pull up that selection pane again. Now, even though I haven't given these a meaningful name, I can see that all of the pins are kind of called graphic 28, 27, so on and so forth. So I can go through and select all of the pins by holding down my Control key, and then I can just press delete to delete all of those out in one go. So now what I want to do is I want to do the zoom in. Now, the way that I find easiest for this is I need to zoom out a little bit on my presentation, and I'm just using the slider in the bottom corner. Because what I want to do is click on this image, and then I'm going to drag it out and make it super huge. And this does look a little bit strange because it kind of goes off the edge of the slide. Now, look at the thumbnail for this. If you want to get an idea of what you're actually going to see on the slide, you need to look at that thumbnail. I might make that a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. So I'm just interested in Florida, so I'm going to move this around. And if I want to go even bigger, I might want to zoom out so it's a bit easier and drag it a bit more and position like so. So I can see in the thumbnail what that's going to look like. I'm pretty happy with that. And then what I need to do is select both of these slides and apply the morph transition. Okay, and that is pretty much it. If we run that again, it should have the effect that we're looking for, like so. Now I could take this on a little bit further. If I duplicate this slide again, Control-D, it might be that I want to talk about Florida and then I want to talk about Texas. So I'm going to take this image and I'm going to move it across. And this kind of gives a panning effect. So I'm happy with how that's looking. I want to make sure I have my morph transition applied. And then now, when I run the presentation, I should get that zoom in effect. And then when I go to the next slide, I'm kind of getting a panning effect moving across. So it's a really effective way of moving between your slides. If I wanted it then to pop back out to the main map, I could duplicate the slide, drag it down underneath, make sure that I have the morph transition applied. And then if we run the whole thing from the beginning again, we're going to zoom into Florida. We're going to pan across to Texas. And then we're going to zoom back out to the main map. So you can really choose to punctuate, highlight what you're actually saying at that particular time with clever use of the morph transition. So I really love this, and definitely something worth playing around with. Now I'm going to show you another example of this, but in a business context. So let's go back to this slide and let's just run it and see what this looks like when it's got a morph transition applied. So again, it might be that I'm talking about the management team. I then want to focus just on Mark Parker. So when I move to the next slide with the morph transition applied, the other two people get minimized down, and then I just have my information there about Mark Parker. I move on to the next slide. I'm then talking about Lucy Moore. All right, so again, very simple to recreate, and I'll just very quickly show you how I did this. All I did was duplicate the slide. And then I replace the images. So I want this one to be Darius. So I want this little image down here to be the same size as this one. So I'm going to jump up to picture format and just check the size that I have. And in this end group, you can see the height and the width. So 458. So I'm going to select Darius and just change to 458. So I know that that is exactly the same size. I'm then going to make Lucy as big as this one down here, which is 1.12. So we're going to 1.12, hit enter, and also the width 1.12, hit enter. And then I just need to place my object. So I want her to go down there. I want Darius to be the main focus of attention. And then of course I would go in and I would change the text here. We'll just say Darius Stone, head of HR. And then I need to make sure that I have that morph transition applied. And you'll see also at the end, I've put that slide again. And if I apply the morph transition, it means it's going to go back to the original slide. So let's play the whole lot together. Like so. So we're going to go talk about Mark Parker. We're then going to talk about Lucy. We're then going to talk about Darius. And then we're going to go back to that main slide. So hopefully you can see how simple and how nice that effect is. Definitely something that you should think about incorporating if you really want to produce a modern looking, fresh presentation. Morph transition. Excellent. We like that one. Moving down. The next thing I want to talk to you about, again, is another newish feature in PowerPoint, and that is slide zoom. And this is really a really cool way of moving between different slides or sections in your presentation in kind of a choose your own story way. If anybody remembers back to when they were younger, maybe I'm the only one who used to have those choose your own story books where you could choose which way you wanted to go through your story. And this is a similar kind of thing. It basically allows the viewer or whoever's looking at this presentation to choose how they want to go through the presentation. So it makes PowerPoint less of a linear application where you're just moving from slide to slide. People can dip into a certain strand and go down that strand, come back to the beginning, maybe explore another strand. And this is what slide zoom can help with. So let me show you an example. I'm going to run this presentation, and you can see here we just have the head of the Florida office, Mr. Cameron Bryce, just there. We have a quote from him, and then underneath, people can select how they want to progress through this presentation depending on what interests them. So it might be that I'm particularly interested in finding out about the team. So I could click here and it's going to zoom me into that slide. I might have another option up here which will allow me to go off in a different direction. So this kind of works more it's like more like a mind map as opposed to moving through PowerPoint in a linear fashion. Now for this one, if I click, it just jumps me back out to where I was, and I can then jump in and explore the other strand. So this is a really cool way of moving through presentations that is very un-PowerPointy, is what I like to say. So let's take a look at how I created this. Now I'm going to delete out the zooms just here, because the first thing that you need to do is you need to create the slides that you want to zoom into. So you can see here I've already created the chart and the Our Team slide. So once you've created the slides, you can then go back to your main slide, jump up to Insert, and in the Links group, you have a Zoom drop-down. And this is where you can select Slide Zoom. And it's a simple case of selecting the slides you want to use. So for me, it's 17 and 18. Clicking on Insert, and I can then position those wherever I want. So I want them down here. This one's a little bit big, so I'm just going to resize it. And I'm going to pull this one over, and I'm going to resize that down again, and just position them however you want. Now, when I'm clicked on these zooms, you'll see that you also get a contextual ribbon called Zoom. So this has all of the options for these particular slide zooms. So one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to give my slide zooms a border, just so it matches the presentation and they stand out a little bit from the background. Now, another little option that I have in here that I want to make sure that I've got turned on is this option in the Zoom options group, Return to Zoom. If you have this selected, when someone zooms into a slide, when they click again, it's going to zoom them back out to the main slide. So if you want that kind of thing to happen, if you want them to always come back to here before they select a different path to go down, then make sure you have Return to Zoom selected for all of your Zoom slides. Once you've done that, that should give you the effect that you're looking for. So I can then zoom in, click again, and it's going to zoom me back out. So a nice little way of thinking about PowerPoint in a different way. So that is slide zoom. Now we're going to revisit this in a few minutes because we're going to do something a bit similar to this. We're going to do a section zoom in a moment, but before we get to that, we need to add sections into our presentation. And this is my next little tip, something that I see people do very rarely. And this is particularly important if you have a very long presentation. It helps give structure to the presentation and it also makes it appear more organized. So for example, if someone sends you a 75 slide presentation and maybe you need to review just a specific section, it's good to have your presentation split up into sections because you can tell people which section they need to focus on. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to add sections into the presentation. So I'm going to click on my first slide, up on the home ribbon, section, add section. You can see at the top it says Untitled, and I'm going to call this section Introduction and rename it. I'm going to say that I want this slide and this slide in the introduction, but I'm going to click on slide 3, add another section, and this one's going to be called Meet the Team and rename. Let's scroll down and I'm going to click on slide 7. Let's add another section called Locations. Let's scroll down a bit more to, where should we go to? Let's go to here. Add another section called Florida Office. And then we're going to get down to towards the end. I'm going to add a final section, which I'm just going to call Close. So very quickly, I've added in these sections and you can see that they are collapsible and expandable. So again, if you're working with a team of people on a presentation, you might decide to assign a different section to a different person. So what that person can then do is collapse up everything else that they're not interested in and just focus on the slides that they need to modify, change, or update. So it's a great way of removing the noise. Makes large presentations a lot easier to organize and manage. Now, another cool thing you can do is section zooms. So if you have sections, you can essentially create a really nice, I like to call it a table of contents, and again, let people choose which sections they want to view first. So what I'm going to do is right at the top is I'm going to add in a new blank slide. I'm just going to place that at the top here. And then I'm going to add a section, and I'm going to call this table of contents, like so. Now, I want these two slides to still be underneath introduction. So I'm going to select these two slides and I'm going to drag and drop them so that they're underneath introduction. I then want table of contents to be at the beginning. So I'm going to click it, drag, and you can see how easy it is to reorder your sections. Now what I can do on this table of contents page is go back to insert, across to zoom, and this time I can use section zoom. And that's going to show me all of the different sections in my presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert 4 of them. So I'm going to select these 4 sections and click on insert. I can then organize these however I want on my page. So let's just do, again, you can use your alignment tools to make these a lot neater. I'm just going to do this quite roughly. And something else I might want to do is select them all and again use my zoom ribbon and add a zoom border so they stand out a little bit from the background. But effectively what these do is allow me to zoom in to different sections. So let's run the presentation. And if I want to jump into this section, I can click it. It's going to jump me in. And it's going to let me run through all of the slides within that section before jumping me back out to the table of contents. So again, this is another way of letting people essentially choose their own path through a presentation based on what they're most interested in or what's relevant to them. It's a very different way of thinking about PowerPoint presentations because you're moving away from that linear model. All right, so sections and section zooms. So moving into our last few points. Now, this next little tip is related to actually presenting a slide deck as opposed to the design of it. So when you're presenting, and I'm just going to select this slide here and jump into slideshow. Sometimes, particularly if you're presenting in a large room to a lot of people, sometimes it's quite hard for people to see a white cursor on a white background. Particularly if they're sitting right in the back row and you're using your cursor to kind of point at things, they might find that a bit difficult to see. So if you right click your mouse, you have pointer options, and I can change to a laser pointer, which instantly makes it a lot easier for people to see exactly where I am on the slide, what I'm pointing at, what I'm trying to emphasize. When you right click and go back to pointer options, you also have the option of selecting a pen. Now, I am terrible at using the pen with a mouse, but you can circle different things. You also have the pointer option of a highlighter if you want to highlight anything particular in the presentation. And of course, if you right click, you have the option to erase all ink on the slide. Now, a quick way of cycling through these things, because sometimes if you're in the middle of a presentation, you don't want to be right-clicking, going to your pointer options and selecting an option. There are shortcut keys. So for example, if I want to switch to my laser pointer, I can just press Ctrl L. If I want to switch to my pen, Ctrl P. If I want to switch to that highlighter, Ctrl I. And if I just want to go back to a regular mouse, Ctrl A is going to take me back to my regular mouse pointer. Another way of temporarily activating the laser pointer, if you just want to use it maybe just to demonstrate something once, if you hold down the Control key on your keyboard and click, you get a temporary pointer. As soon as you let go of the mouse, it disappears. Control click again to bring it back. So these are really useful little tips if you're presenting to a large audience, or even if you're doing a presentation on a Zoom meeting or online. The final thing I'm going to talk about here when it comes to presenting is if you want to focus everyone's attention on you and what you're saying and completely remove the presentation behind you, you can press B to black it out. So everybody's attention is now on you, what you're saying. They're not staring at the presentation behind you. Press B again to bring it back. Alternatively, if you prefer a white background, you can do W to white everything out, W again to bring your presentation back. So some really nice little shortcuts there, which will help you when you're presenting content. All right. The final few points, we've got about 5 minutes left. I've got a couple of other points that I want to cover with you. And I'm actually going to switch back to the presentation I started out with originally, because I want to show you this last slide. And I hope you can see this. I am aware that this requires a reasonably decent internet connection, but hopefully most of you are seeing here that I actually have a video playing in the background of this slide. And again, this is a really good way of making your presentations a little bit more interesting and engaging. I don't have a static image, I have a little video playing. Now, this is super simple to do. Again, the video that I've used is available in one of the resources that I'm going to show you at the end of this course, but you could still have a static image as opposed to a video. What you also might notice is that I have a kind of transparency over the top, so that even though I have a video in the background, the text on top still stands out. So let me show you very quickly how I created this. I'm going to come out of there. Let's jump back to our presentation. And I'm just going to click here and insert a new blank slide. So what I did here was I downloaded a little video from a free video website that I'm going to show you in a moment. I've saved it off to my local drives. So now all I need to do is go up to Insert. In the final group here, I can insert a video from my PC. And it's this one just here. And there we go. So I can choose to play it, so I can check what that's going to look like. And again, I apologize if this is a bit jumpy, if you have, if your internet connection is not great. I can check that video. I'm going to jump up to my playback ribbon, and I'm going to say that I want this video to loop around because it's only a few seconds long. I want it to loop around until I move on to the next slide. And then all I've done to make this a bit more transparent is I've inserted a shape over the top. So I've chosen a rectangle. I've drawn a big old rectangle over the top of the video, and then I've changed that shape fill. So you can choose whatever color you like. I'm going to go with a blue. I'm going to say I don't want an outline. And then I've just done a right click and changed the transparency of the shape to either let through less or more of that video. And this is great if you plan to layer text over the top, because the last thing you want is a video that distracts away from the actual text. So I'm going to just let a little bit of that video sneak through. I can then go and put my text over the top. So I'm going to insert a text box, which I might want to say, let's just say, thank you. And of course, you can format that in any way you see fit. So I'm going to make that white. I'm going to change it to, let's do my favorite Lato font. I'm going to make it quite a bit bigger. And of course, I'm going to do my old trick of dragging this out to the bounds of the slide and centering. And then when I play it very quickly, you'll see that's the kind of effect that you get in a few clicks. Really, really nice. And of course, you can do a similar thing with images. So if I jump back up to this slide where we had an image, if I wanted to have text running over the top of this, again, I'm a big fan of doing this, adding a transparent rectangle over the top. Again, selecting the color that I want. So maybe I'm just going to have, let's have this blue-gray color. Right click and just adjusting the transparency It gives me more control over how much of that image I'm seeing through that rectangle. Hopefully that's given you a few little tips and tricks there. I'm going to move down just to show you this in action in a slide like this. So for example, I've used a lot of the techniques that I've run through in this particular slide, and I think it makes it really interesting. It looks modern, it looks slick. I've got a static image in the background with a transparent rectangle over the top. I've got really nice modern fonts. And then I've utilized icons, which are available in PowerPoint. I've utilized a circle shape, which just has no fill. And I've utilized minimal animation so that it's not overwhelming, okay? So again, let's just run through some of these points. Choosing clear, compatible fonts. These fonts are of the same family, but you can see I've switched between using uppercase and lowercase just so everything doesn't look too uniform and too boring. I've used large background images and transparent shapes. I've used iconography. Character spacing. It's always nice to play around with character spacing. I've made the spacing between each character in the word a little bit wider. Thoughtful animation. So animation that adds to the presentation as opposed to detracting. And also good use of color. Again, hope this is showing up for you, but these three headings are very slightly different colors. And I've used the eyedropper tool to pick up colors from the image so that everything looks cohesive and tied together. Lovely. Now, the final thing, if we move on to the last slide here. This is resources. So this is where you can get all of the images that I've used in this presentation. Now, when it comes to things like high quality imagery and also videos, Pexels and Unsplash are websites that I use all the time. All of the images on there you can just download and use for free in any presentation. If you're looking for icons, then PowerPoint has its own selection of icons, but if you're looking for thousands of different icons to use in presentations for free, then the Noun project allows you to set up a free account and download icons from there. And if you're looking for things like slide templates, then these two sites are good for those free resources as well. And I just want to end by just jumping into Pexels just to show you how simple it is. So if we jump back to Pexels, so Pexels.com, when you open it up, it looks like this. You can pretty much search for anything you like. So if I go to search for landscape and hit enter, it's going to pull back all of these really high quality images that you can use in your presentations. If you're looking for videos, if you look at the top, currently I'm clicked on photos, but if I want videos like the ones that I showed you in the presentation, I can filter by videos and you can see you just get a few short little videos that look really nice in the background of your presentations. And all you do is click free download, it will download it to your local drives and you can then just insert it into your presentation. So this is pretty much what I use when I'm creating really nice looking PowerPoint presentations. So that is pretty much it. I think we had more than 10 tips there, but hopefully you can see, as I said, you don't really need to be a designer. I always start out with an image in the background, I apply my transparencies, I add in some icons, and then I tend to think about the colors that I'm using and also my fonts. And more often than not, I can put together something that looks really effective and really different to other presentations that are out there. Quite often, a lot of the presentations you'll come across aren't particularly great. So follow these steps and you should end up with something that looks super cool. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed that. I feel like I'm out of breath now. There was so much to cover in that session. I'm going to hand across to Adam for anybody that has any questions or comments.
Nice work, Debs. Going through that, I don't think I knew any of those, which might surprise you to hear after that fantastic slide that you saw at the beginning, everybody.
I didn't want to talk too badly about your template, Adam.
Put together by my fair hand. You might notice that the PowerPoint logo is slightly misaligned because I did it by eye rather than using the align tools because I didn't realise they existed. So That was a really, really useful presentation, and I hope everyone else found it useful as well. We do have a couple of questions. One from Jean earlier on to do with the Zoom slides. Can you put a label near the Zoom slides, such as option 1, 2, or option 3?
Absolutely. So you could add a text box. That's not a problem. So if we go down to here, I don't have a great deal of room, but if I wanted to essentially label these, which I think is what you're saying, you just go to insert, you can put it in a text box, and, you know, I'll just type in chart. Oops, got my caps lock on. That's not good. Charts. And yeah, you can put that label wherever you like above the Zoom slide if you want to. Yes.
Great. Just let us know if that's what you meant, Jean, if it just if that covers it, or if there was something slightly different. And then a really good one actually at the end, which I don't know if you'll have this to hand, Debs, but is there a list of fonts that you'd recommend? I know that's something that I always struggle with, like font groups. And the fonts you've put together here are, well, most of them look quite nice.
Yeah, they are.
Together.
I'm exactly the same. I am terrible when it comes to knowing which fonts look good in presentations. And so what I tend to do is I tend to look at a lot of presentations online. And, you know, if you're looking for inspiration, I'll tell you where I go. I go to Pinterest. So I'm sure most of you are aware of Pinterest. If you jump into Pinterest and type in PowerPoint presentations, it pulls up a whole list. Now, I'm not saying that you need to copy them or whatever, but it just gives you some inspiration, and it will also show you different fonts that they use as well. So I tend to go through different presentations, and I look at things, and like the one that I've started using recently, which is the one which I've been using throughout this presentation, is this Lato Black font. I find that that's really nice. I use Lato Black for headings and Lato Light for the text underneath, because certain fonts obviously go together. You normally find that, you know, for like something like, what's another one that I use? Segoe. I never know how to say it. Segoe UI. This one down here, you'll normally find that a font has numerous different incarnations. So these are all of the same font family. So I tend to find that these generally work well together if they're in the same family.
Stick to a font family is quite a nice way of doing it. And then also the consistency. So make all of your big headings obviously the same font, all of your subheadings a different font, and all of your text a different font. And also, if you notice the consistency across the slides with regards to caps and lowercase as well.
Yes.
You know, that's something that I think makes a big difference as well.
And experimenting as well.
Things, aren't they, really?
Yeah, they are, but it makes such a difference.
It makes it really professional.
It does. Even like here, like I have the title is essentially in, you know, lowercase, uppercase and lowercase, whereas the subtitle is all in caps. Yeah. Even something as small as that gives your presentation a completely different feel. If this was all the same as this, it just doesn't look as professional. And it's little things like this. Even down here with this word connect, collaborate, and grow, I've changed the character spacing. So we have wider gaps in between the characters. And I've only done it on these 3 headings. But again, it has a really big overall impact. Okay. Yeah, the character spacing.
That makes them,
yeah, you can do that just from here. So where I'm clicked now.
So you just select one of those.
Yeah. So you can see you can adjust the character spacing. So sometimes playing around with things like that and really looking at lots of presentations online is where you get your ideas. You start to see things that you like, how things are done. And that's kind of what I've done over the years. So I basically steal things from other people and apply them into my presentation.
It's a Picasso saying, isn't it? Oh no, there's a famous artist saying about stealing versus. I mean, I think all great artists borrow ideas, don't they?
Yes.
And the what I was going to say, there's something for Patty as well. She was struggling to get up the contextual menus. Can you just click on an image or an icon and show how the contextual menus come up? So...
Yes. So contextual menus, they're essentially ribbons that don't appear until they're needed. So if I click on, I've got an icon here. If I click on, oh, actually, that's not a good one because that's all grouped together. Let me go to something else. Let's go to here. So if I click on this shape just here, because the shape contains a picture, I now have 2 contextual ribbons at the top here. One to format the shape and one to format the picture. So as soon as I click away, they disappear because I'm no longer clicked on a shape, so I don't need those menus. And you'll find that is fairly consistent throughout. If I click on this is a picture. As soon as I click on it, I get the picture format contextual ribbon. If I click away from the picture, that ribbon disappears. So what you see up here really depends on what you're currently clicked on.
Yeah, and Patty's also asked what are you using to download the fonts. The fonts, I believe, are the ones in PowerPoint. Patty.
Yes. So in webinars, I never use anything that requires you to buy anything or download anything. All of the fonts I've used are available as standard in PowerPoint.
The standard ones in PowerPoint, indeed.
Yeah. So you should find these Lato ones that I've used in here are just available in your drop-down list. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then I don't know if anyone else, I got a slightly jittery view of the morph transition, but that morph transition is amazing. It's really smooth. It's only because you're looking at it via a screen recording tool, basically, and obviously it's like, that causes an issue. But if you do use that morph tool, it looks super professional when you're sort of zooming out and zooming in, people go in big, small, all that kind of stuff. It looks really brilliant. So if you can include morph in any of your presentations, that really, I think, gives it a wow factor, and it's so simple. Yeah. It's just a really nice transition. So
yeah, definitely gives the wow factor. So simple. You just create your slides and then transitions, apply morph, and it's like you've created a mini animation.
Exactly. Fantastic. All right. Any other questions, guys, or should we leave it there? I know we've taken up more time than we said we would, so we're over the hour. But anybody got any other questions? If not, we will wish you all well, and we'll be back online in January. And we'll
seems so far away.
I know. Well, we haven't even decided which webinars to do in January.
We need ideas.
So yeah, any ideas, do send them over, and or drop them in the comment box now. I think we had one already in, so we'll add that to our list, Debs.
Yeah.
Let's we look forward to seeing you then, and of course I'll send out emails with all of the upcoming webinars and update the webinar sections on the website as well, so you know where to you'll see all those soon. We'll get those done in the next couple of weeks, so we're booked up until the end of March for sure.
And happy Christmas, everyone, I guess.
So for those of you joining us from the US, happy Thanksgiving.
Yep, happy Thanksgiving.
Next week. Have a fantastic time. If you're hopefully you're allowed to spend time with family. They're umming and ahhing in the UK at the moment as to whether we'll be able to see people over Christmas or not. So yeah, we'll see. It could be a very different holiday season to normal, but I do hope wherever you are, you have a nice and relaxing time at some point over the next couple of months, and we look forward to seeing you in January, all guns blazing for a new year of learning. It's going to be great.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To get 4 free courses in Excel, QuickBooks, Microsoft Project, and Photoshop, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.